And I think it has to do a lot with your personality, more so than like you're born with it. Um, certain things like vocals, there are genetically, you might be born with an ear that for some reason is a little bit better, or you're for example, Freddie Mercury, pretty big example.
Right.
They say like he had like a something with his mouth, his jaw shape, or his teeth led to him being able to sing in the manner that he did.
SouLivate.
What up, everyone? Welcome to the SouLivate podcast, created to elevate your soul and give you gems and insights into the world of music and put your spirits levels above the rest. We welcome all musical vagabonds and wanderers to join us on this journey and become part of the SouLivate Fam. Some of you know that SouLivate is actually a two-man process, but unfortunately my co-host couldn't be here today, so shout out to Spencer Reese. He really wanted to be here. He actually has a lot of similarities with my next super special guest. But enough of Spencer Reese. Shout out to Spencer Reese. He couldn't be here. He's here in spirits. My next guest. So a lot of you know that I was in the America's Next Top Hitmaker, the Rolling Stone contest, and I took the contest seriously, and I started to look into some of the other artists that were featured in the contest, and I came across my next guest, Hailey, and I was very impressed. I found out that this special young lady is a songwriter, which is very rare in our day and in our time and age. She's an author. She's a multi-instrumentalist. And to find this sort of combination it's like a rare diamond. And to find it all, packaged into one person is one in a billion. So I'm super excited to welcome today's guest. And thank you so much for being here. The very special, the very awesome Hailey Ezzell. And we're going to have round of applause here. So welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here from the bottom of my heart. This means the world to me.
Of course. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I'm always excited to get to blab about about music and about my music in particular. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, there's so much things to uncover and unpack, and just to keep it real. We like to keep it real on this podcast. I was like, listen, let me snatch this interview early, because when this girl is big, I'm like, look, I was one of the first people to have her interviewed, man. So I'm like, let me get that early. And usually, listen, I have a very good eye for talent and everything. Like, my prophecies came true, so I know what I'm talking about. In the next 5 to 10 years, when you're taking over the world, I can claim that I had you as a guest first. So thank you. Listen, to all of us, tell us about yourself. Where are you from? What was your childhood like? What was your musical beginnings like? How did that happen? Who inspired you? Who took part in this great creation of Hailey Ezzell?
So originally I'm from North Carolina, but now I live in Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. And I've now technically lived here longer than I lived there, but I spent most of my youngest years in North Carolina, so a lot of that influenced me just with all the country music around the time, and in that region especially. But my parents, I mean, largely inspired me, of course. My dad actually used to be a roadie for a local cover band in the area when we lived in North Carolina. And when I was really young, he had this company that sold equipment to KJs, karaoke jockeys. And so he'd have the tracks and the speakers and the everything just so people could get started in karaoke business. So he had a lot of experience kind of on the kind of technical side of it. And
Mhm.
he's also a phenomenal singer. And my mom also, like, not to the same extent in terms of the business of it, but she growing up was, you know, in marching band and stuff. She always was singing around the house. And so I grew up doing karaoke in the house. We had a in built-in system into our house. So but I kind of grew up in that environment where it was just very casual for, you know, family fun night is doing karaoke in the living room. And it was just very kind of seemed natural at the time, but now I realize how special it was. So that's kind of the beginning of it, and that's where it's so it started very, very young for me in terms of the musical influence on my life.
So you had this musical family. Shout out to your parents, man.
Mhm.
That's awesome. And it's super cool that you can acknowledge that now that, like, when you were a kid, maybe you didn't think it was a special situation, but now
Yeah.
you're looking back, you're like, yo, I actually had a special environment to grow up in, man. So that's awesome. Who were some of the artists that you remember, like, being younger when you were like looking up to or really like their art and gravitated towards?
So when I was really little, I listened to pretty much what was on the radio at the time, and my parents were both into you know, a lot of the 80s rock acts. My mom huge into the Bon Jovi and Journey and the Eagles, and my dad uh very into James Taylor, like more so the singer-songwriter aspect, the James Taylor, Jim Croce, Doobie Brothers sort of area of that. So that was a lot of what I was listening to. And then just stuff that was on the radio at the time, like Daughtry, Three Doors Down, sort of that early 2000s post-war, if you will, rock music
Mhm.
was very kind of prevalent in what I was listening to at the time, just on the radio. Uh, so there's a lot of that. And then when I started really studying music, when I started really listening to it and paying attention, I was getting into, you know, Guns N' Roses, a lot of the hair metal stuff actually. So Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Poison, they were big for me. And then I got more into the 70s stuff, which is kind of more so where I lay now is between the 70s and 80s stuff, with, you know, Foreigner and Styx. Styx is the big one for me. And Pat Benatar, Heart, all those kinds of groups where they were rock bands, but they had a certain amount of depth and I'll call it sophistication about them, whereas like they had very, you know, thought out lyrics and very detailed song structures, you know, not just like basic stuff, which
Right.
there's nothing wrong. It works for a reason, but they I'll be a first to say it. A lot of the stuff I write's very verse, chorus, but they have very elaborate song plots. So a lot of that inspired me, especially as a writer and as a singer, just in that realm. So that's pretty much what I listen to even now. My taste hasn't changed that much, but it has expanded.
Was there a certain artist that you tried to emulate, like when you were younger, and really looked up to, like, copying their song formats and like styles and things like that? Because we all go through that when
Mhm.
in the process of finding our own style. I think in the beginning years we always copy a little here and there, even sometimes without realizing we're doing that. So was that the same for you? Can you remember something like that?
Yeah, I definitely had parts of that, and the big group for me in terms of because I play piano as my main instrument after voice, so my biggest inspiration in that regard was Amy Lee from Evanescence.
Okay.
So a lot of the just sort of the piano ballads and seeing how the piano could be utilized in the rock sense, because I feel like a lot of people don't acknowledge that the
Hmm.
piano I mean, of course, people think classical music,
Right.
but when rock music started off in the 50s, it was piano driven because they hadn't nailed down the electric guitar yet. So you had Jerry Lee Lewis and people such as that, where they were playing rock piano. So it's that's sort of the roots of it. And I felt as a younger artist, I felt that Evanescence, vocally, piano wise, image wise, was very much what I was trying to do, at least at the beginning. Um, so yeah, I definitely took a lot of inspiration, especially clothing wise, from from Evanescence.
That's
I
awesome.
still do, yeah.
That's awesome. Shout out to them. I just wanted to acknowledge real quick that I think it's so badass. I think it's so cool that a young artist actually takes the craft seriously as you do and is not afraid to do their own thing, because I think that once like hip hop became pop and mainstream, a lot of people just thought to themselves, well, I'm a musician, let me do this real quick. And what
Mhm.
we're finding out in the mainstream today is, and I criticize this all the time, is that we're finding, like you said, simplicity is beauty, but we're finding very repetitive sound. That is, there's no more originality, there's no more
Mhm.
young people that are, experimenting and maybe going back to the roots of music. And my co-host, again, shout out to Spencer Reese, you would love to talk to him because he's like you, he's a young man that's, he's an incredible singer, but he also does like heavy metal and stuff like that. So I love that you guys are not afraid to step out of the norm and what the trend is and actually do your own thing. So I commend you for that. I think that's awesome. When did you do you remember when you first started to experience an actual writing? Like, was there a moment?
So I kind of had the realization that I've been writing longer than I realized, if that makes any sense. Um, Sort of recently, I was reflecting back on like my early childhood, and I was like, wait, I've been songwriting forever. Because when I was in elementary school, I remember this distinctly. I was in like third grade, maybe. So I was like 8 or 9. We used to have this thing called Spirit Week, and I think they still do it here in the States. Where or not even Spirit Week, it was called Dr. Seuss Week, and it was all the
Yeah,
different days you dressed up as like a book from Dr. Seuss's
I
um
remember that. I
thing.
remember that. We
Yeah.
used to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did that, and I found, actually, now that I found it, I remember doing it, but I found a notebook where I had taken each day of the week, and I tried to write a song for it.
Oh,
Now, it wasn't in the correct format or anything, but it was like, 6 or 8 lines of, like, writing on Wacky Wednesday or whatever, you know? So, there was, definitely an early interest in it, and I mean, I started writing books too around
how old were
that
you? I'm
time period.
sorry for interrupting you. How old were you at that time?
Probably 8 or 9, maybe 10, like somewhere in that
Mhm. Neighborhood.
prepubescent time frame. That's when I started doing it, and then I started again, like actively, where I'm like, I'm gonna write songs. I
Mhm.
started doing that um, in like seventh or eighth grade. I was like, I'm serious now.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm 13. Very serious about
Mhm.
but I didn't really necessarily stop between A and B. I just kind of had times where I spent more or less time on it throughout just grade school. So I've kind of not been nonstop doing it more or less since I was like 8 or 10, something like that.
Mhm. So, I'm getting a sense that you are this like musical historian. So when you started to actually, put down your thoughts on a piece of paper, was it important for you to learn what song structures are and things like that? And do you remember where you were like, you wrote something and you were like, well, okay, I'm satisfied. I wrote an actual song the way a song is supposed to be.
So there's definitely been a lot of songs I've written over this period of time, but I'm trying to think of how to best answer that. Because I write lyrics first. I understand that to most people that's backwards. I write
Yeah,
lyrics first, and then I write the piano part.
cool.
And so the first song that I really remember, I know there was more before this,
That
but
that's what I'm sorry for interrupting you, but that's
no,
what I'm really like secretly picking at. I'm trying to see if you remember your first actual song and maybe you can share with us. A lot of artists are like embarrassed of their first songs, but I think it's cool to document that, man, you know? So, do you remember that first song and maybe you can tell us like what you were thinking about, what you were living through?
God, I'm trying to remember what would have been the first. I remember the first one where I wrote the song and it was like, "Oh, okay, this one's actually good." I
Mhm.
remember that one,
Yeah.
but I think I may have blacked out the ones before that. That may
Yeah.
'cause I had this problem, especially early on, but I still am kind of fighting with it where I would get really wordy with my lyrics because I would have the lyrics first, and so I didn't have a framework for the rhythm or anything. I've kinda got a checkpoint for that now where I can make sure I don't do that anymore, but they used to just be so wordy and melodramatic, and, oh, wait, I just remembered one of them.
Okay. Let's get
Oh
it.
god, it it was pretty much this is embarrassing, you're right.
We
I was
want the juicy stuff, man. Come on.
I was in, like, ninth grade, and my boyfriend of, like, 2 months or whatever 3 months. My boyfriend of 3 months was breaking up with me,
Oh man.
and, it was big deal,
Yes.
but it seemed like it at the time, and, I was like, "Oh, if we just, like" I had it in my head where I was like, if we just had, like, a conversation, we'd be able to it's not even like we had a fight or anything, it's just one of those
Mhm.
things where it's like, "I don't really have time for this in my schedule right now because 'cause I'm in ninth grade, I have school."
Right.
Um, but it was just one of those things where it's like, "If we just talked, I know we'd be able to resolve this thing." And so I wrote a song about that,
Wow.
and it was wordy and very it didn't have, speaking of song structure where it's, supposed to be verse, chorus, verse,
Yeah.
chorus, more or less.
I
So I
mean,
it's supposed to be,
yeah,
it's
not
not.
necessary, but yeah, yeah.
It was pretty much all verse. I don't think there was a chorus, there was no bridge, it was just it was more so
May-
like a poem than an actual song.
Maybe it was a rap song. Maybe it was your first
Maybe
dabble into rapping, man.
I yeah, I'm sure someone I could pawn it off onto someone like, "Here, trust me, this'll be good."
I think that I think it's really cool as an artist, and you'll find this like later on once you have like 10, 20, 25 years
Mhm,
is looking back, because a lot of people don't get to do this in
mhm,
life unless you're like keeping a journal or something, and a lot of people, they don't have time for that. But us as artists, and you'll find this like I said, in 10, 15, 20 years, where you can look back into your life lyrically, and you'll be able to remember the times and different
mhm,
situations that you went through, like the situation that you just mentioned with the breakup, that at the time you thought it was the biggest thing in the
mhm.
world for you. So I think it's one privilege, us as artists, that we have. What was your how did your journey into playing all these different instruments start? Like, are you self-taught? Did you have to go to musical school? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, so, my mom tells this story that, in terms of singing, because singing was the first thing that came to me, if you will, um, that I was maybe, like, 6 or something, and she was in the kitchen, and she heard me singing along to the theme song for Barney, and
Nice.
it was notable to her because, little kids kinda struggle with pitch and
Right.
timing and stuff, and she said she'll claim that she's actually outside. I could if I asked her right now, she'd be like,
Right.
"No, it was perfect. It was the
Wow.
pitch was there, the timing was there, it was right on." She called my
Nice.
dad because my dad's a singer, and she
Nice.
goes, "She can sing, she can do." So that one kind of happened accidentally, and I did do I took chorus for 7 years, and that really did a lot to strengthen my voice. I did it at the school level. I did the county level, which is called all county chorus, where your chorus teacher has to nominate you to be one of the best in the county, is what they
Wow.
say. And then for 4 years, I did all state in Florida, uh, and that's where you audition and you do a music theory test and you do everything, and you do a sight singing test, and if you pass those, you get music and you get randomly sampled on it. Like they are like, okay, sing this to here, and I did that 4 years. 1 year as a soprano 2 and 3 years as a soprano 1, which is the smallest group of singers that they have. So
Okay.
they say it's very exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
But so I did that. That was kind of my singing journey. I had a vocal coach for maybe a year, maybe 2 years. That was that. And then I started piano when I was 8, kind of on a whim, and just kept on with that for a while. Then my dad my dad plays guitar. He plays acoustic guitar, mainly rhythm, backing stuff, and I was kind of interested in that. And when I decided, like, I'm going to be a musician, I was like, okay, I'll play guitar, but I didn't know how to do it. I'm still not as strong as I'd like to be on guitar. But I actually kind of learned a little bit of guitar, just G, C, D, like basic chords,
SouLivate.
and enough to get through a Hootie and the Blowfish song, pretty much.
Okay.
And I'm actually still working on strengthening that up. I figured that out mainly through Google. I'd pull up the chord sheets, and then I'd go, okay, well, what is a G chord? What is a D chord? What is the C chord? I'd kind of figured out that way. And that's still kind of how I figure out guitar. I learned F sharp minor the other day. I was very proud of myself. It's an ugly chord. I like it. But bass is one that I self-taught. And it's because my dad as well was playing bass. He plays guitar and bass. And I was getting tired of hearing him play bass because it would wake me up in the morning on the weekend. So I'm like, I'm over it. And I was listening to him, and specifically he was playing Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. And it's just dun, 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 dun. It's 2 notes. Sitting there in bed, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, I could probably do that. So I could probably do that. So I figured that out. Also, reading tab, just kind of like Googling it and going, okay, well, if that's 3, I can count to 3. Okay. And, sort of figuring it out that way. And YouTube song playthrough tutorials with tab. And then drums, I also, like, I took, I think, 3 drum lessons. But I'd already kind of figured out the mechanics just by watching people. Because that's the main way I figure stuff out when I'm self-taught is just kind of watching. So there was a period of time where I was in School of Rock, which is the after-school music program, and based off the movie. And I would go with my dad to the grad school, which was the 18 and up, and I would watch one of the drum instructors play with the band, and I just kind of watch him, see if I could kind of figure out what it was he was doing.
Wow.
So I did that. Yeah, most of my instruments are self-taught, but I usually, like, guitar I did, I think, 2 lessons on. Bass I did 1. Drums I did 3. And then melodica, you don't really need lessons on that. And the mandolin, I just mainly Google it.
Wow.
That's, yeah.
That's crazy. That's super cool.
Thank you.
Do you think that, I mean, obviously skills, no matter what it is, takes practice and polishing and things like that. But do you think that artists such as yourself, that you have to be also born with something, a certain spark, call it genetic, call it spiritual, whatever it is, that gave you that voice at such a young age, singing that Barney song perfectly, and now picking up all these different instruments? Do you think that you have to be born with a certain spark?
So I think there's a bit of inherent talent, as people kind of like to call it, but there is a lot of determination, and I think it has to do a lot with your personality more so than like you're born with it. Um, certain things like vocals, there are genetically, you might be born with an ear that for some reason is a little bit better, or you're, for example, Freddie Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
pretty big example.
Right.
They say like he had like a something with his mouth, his jaw shape, or his
Mhm.
teeth led to him being able to sing in the manner that he did.
Wow.
I'm not saying though, based on that he was just able to sing,
Right.
but he had, maybe a little bit of an up,
Yeah.
he's able to kind of do that. When I was younger, when I was 3 years old, I had an asthma attack.
Oh wow.
So I cannot run at all. Part of
Mm.
it's because I'm lazy. The other part is just because my ribs will start hurting. But
Mm.
I can hold a note. I've never timed it, but I can sit there and stretch that note for as long as I need to,
Yeah, I heard you doing some impressive covers, man. So I
Thank
can
you.
I can second that. This girl can hold a note.
And part of it's because I trained myself to go, okay, well, let me try to be able to do that. Um, but I feel like there is a bit of a genetic component of like you're born with talent, or you have it, and everything and anything, it's a gift,
Right.
but it's kind of like, okay, well, what do you do with that gift? Your
Exactly.
your friend gives you a hammer. What do you do with that?
Right.
It's kind of what you do with it and who you're raised with. My mom is the one who's like, hey, do you want to play piano? When I was 8, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, why not?
Mhm.
And so that, if she never asked me, I probably would have never learned how to play. And because I learned piano, I learned all the other instruments.
But
So
your family, you would say, are supportive, right? Throughout your
yeah, yeah,
musical
yeah.
journey.
All of my songs are actually produced by my dad.
Oh wow! Shout out to your dad.
And yeah, Jim. No, he uh he built a home studio at my parents' house, and like we would. Part of it was because during COVID, everything shut down, and we couldn't go to our rehearsal space that we used to rent out. And then part of it was also like, wanted to be really cool to have home studio. So
Mhm.
we
That's
he built
awesome, man.
that, and yeah, so he's actually, I have on this Tuesday or next, I think it's this Tuesday, I'm supposed to be going into the studio with him. It's also just a home studio.
Cool.
But he produces, he mixes it, he helps me record it. It's so
Wow.
he's very helpful on the technical side of it, and my mom has always given me ideas. She was actually just showing me a magazine with like, oh, you can wear this on stage and this would look good with this, and da da da. So
She's like your stylist, right?
yeah, in a lot of ways, and she comes up with she really should have gone into marketing, because she comes up with uh my book, right? I'm
we,
going on
we- we're,
a
we're 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 gonna get into that, man. Like I wanna, yeah.
but we'll come to it, but just for I'm going to do a book signing tour, if you will,
Yes,
behind it. And that was
yes,
all of her idea.
cool.
She's like, you should do some signings. I was like, okay. And so she helps me along the marketing and the image and stuff, and he helps me on the technical side, and I get ideas from both of them, and my boyfriend helps me a lot with different
Awesome.
ideas. So it's I have a very supportive group around me. Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you remember when you actually decided for yourself, like set in stone, that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Was there a moment, or did it happen gradually?
So the initial moment I actually do remember, and then it kind of happened gradually as well. So I remember specifically, I was in math class. I was in 6th grade. I decided all this a while ago. I was in 6th grade, and we could listen to music on our phones with headphones, like if we were doing homework, towards the end of class. And I had finished my work, and I was listening to Miss America by Styx, as I
Mhm.
said, like that's my favorite band. And I was listening to it. It's a crazy guitar work on that,
Yeah.
wonder like 3-part harmony, beautiful. I love that song. And I was listening to it and I said, you know, I could do this. I could be a musician. And at that point, I'd been playing piano for 5 years, maybe at that point. And I was really kind of starting off. And at this point, I had terrible stage fright.
Wow.
I was very, I could not sing in front of my family. I had a grandmother come over once and she's like, "Oh, sing a song for me, Hailey, sing a song." And I was like, I felt like bile rising. Like I was going to throw up. I was like, I cannot do it. But I sort of was like, you know, I could do this. And then a short time after that, I joined School of Rock, and one of the things they do is they have forget what they actually call it, but they make these different shows where it's like, okay, we have 3 different shows. Let's say we're doing like an 80s rock, a grunge, and a pop show. Just very general. It's like you'd sign up and you'd be a part of a band. And so I started working with that in middle school, and I got to be very kind of authoritative on it. I was like, yeah, you know, I know what I'm doing, and I know what's going on, and I know how to play the song. And so that was kind of, you know, so the initial thought was that scene in 6th grade in math class, and then over time I just kind of got more confident through working in that program, and then I just had my kind of slogan, if you will, is too many people have told me yes for me to say no.
Wow. I
So
like.
a lot of people are like, "Hey, you should try this. You should do this." It's like, "This is you're really, really good." Blah 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 blah. And I was kind of like, you know, okay, if I'm going to believe these people at their word, then I should try it. I would be a disservice to myself and to all
Yes.
these people who like me to
Yes.
not at least try.
See, I always say this, and we actually, it's crazy that you mentioned this because I always say, and you touched on this, that every I think I believe in this, that every individual was blessed with at least, we're blessed with a lot of gifts, but at least one specific gift we are blessed
Mhm.
with. And it is your gift, but it also belongs to the world, and
Exactly.
it's your responsibility to share this
Mhm.
gift, give it to the world, if you will. So you know, it's so cool that you said that. So this is the one thing that I'm trying to like get clear about you, because I was a little confused about this, going, you know, doing my little homework on you and everything. Is Hailey Ezzell a solo act, or is there also a band, and maybe these two ventures are different? Like, how would you, you know, clarify that?
So essentially, everything that I do under my name, I consider myself a solo act. I am currently, since I'm wrapping up work on my debut album, I'm trying to put together a band behind it, but my current intention and my current vision is to go behind my name because I'm not opposed to working with other people at all. All the songs that I've recorded, I have a guitarist and a drummer and a bass player who
Yes,
I
yes.
they quote unquote work for me,
Got you.
but
Got
they're friends of mine and they help me incredibly. I would list them, but they kind of vary based on the tracks. I have a pool
you.
of people who I work with.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, they're just
So for
wonderful
now,
people.
so shout out to your wonderful friends.
Yeah.
So for now, Hailey Ezzell is a solo act, and the band that does help you with your various projects are like a Hailey Ezzell band, you would
Yeah,
say, right?
pretty much. And then I also have a band that is my cover band, and we sometimes do my songs. I actually just had a show last night with them. That's called Stone Lace. But we're primarily in that venture. We're primarily like a I call it party rock, 70s,
Right.
80s, 90s upbeat
Gotcha.
rock music. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I'm not I'll be honest, I'm not too crazy on covers, but I do like the way you do your covers.
thank
So
you.
I do, yeah, I do have to say that you do add like your own, Haley spice to it, man, and I
Mhm.
can dig it.
Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations on your upcoming debut album. It's gonna be super exciting. Make sure that once you do put it out, maybe you can come back and talk about the process. We would love to have you back.
That would be great.
Um, what's the story behind your book? So again,
Huh.
as I mentioned, Haley's also crazy enough an author. I don't know how you find the time to do all these things. Um, the book Ghostwriters. What is that? How long has that concept been around? What's the story behind it? And where is it today?
So essentially, the purpose of the book is that I've pretty much always been a writer. As I said, I've been dabbling in songwriting since I was a child. And around that same time, I was also writing little books. That would probably now be dinged for copyright infringement, but I was 8, so I think I get a pass.
Mhm.
Uh, but I've always kind of been a writer. I started like a lot of writers do, embarrassingly writing, fan fiction about different things and, kind of delving into other people's universes. And so when it came time, when I was in high school and I got to pick what electives I wanted to do, creative writing was one of the classes I could choose. And there were only creative writing 1 through 3. I took it every year. So I actually took 1, 2, 3, and 1 because they couldn't, it didn't exist. So I just took it again and essentially worked as a teacher's assistant there. But I really in high school got invested in writing stories because I've always been a big reader. I love Stephen King. I read a lot of I read a lot of rock biographies and autobiographies, a lot of music stuff, and I love a good fiction book. I like horror. I like the way that you can get really
Mhm.
invested in it. So when using all this interest, when I decided to, I was going to college, I had to pick a major. I was like, just in case this music thing doesn't work, I
Mhm.
should have, quote unquote, the backup plan that, everyone has shoved in their pocket somewhere. Uh, and my backup plan was a equally unstable career choice, which was writing and editing specifically. And so I went to a school where writing was an option as a major, and you had to do a thesis project to graduate because it was an honors college, very fancy. And so they're like, okay, you have to do a thesis. I said, can I write a book? I said, yeah, yeah. People have done that before. They've never actually finished their books, but yeah, you can write a book. And I said, okay. And I had come up with an idea in 2019. It was going to be a song. It
Wow.
was going to be a song. And I was like, okay, here's like a light idea for a song. And it just never really evolved beyond that point. I had it saved as like a note on my phone. And I just kind of left it there, let it lie, and then I got accepted. I was in school, and I kind of went back to it. I was like, "Hey, I could. This could be a book, you know."
Wow.
And I changed some elements of it, and I obviously fleshed it out quite a bit from being a song to being a novel. Um, and just over the course, I was in college for 3 years because I graduated early. And so as my thesis project, I submitted a full novel. It's a short book. It's like 130 pages
Ah,
maybe.
that's impressive, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it came about. And yeah, it was pretty much it was to be a thesis, but I knew as soon as I started writing it, I was like, oh, and I can publish a book when I'm done, casually. I can submit this and publish it, and it'll be its own thing. So that's how it came to be.
Can you talk about what the book, maybe not reveal everything because obviously we want to encourage people to go get it and actually indulge in it the way you're supposed to indulge in a good book. But what's the story like? What is it about in short?
So the easiest way and the shortest way I can summarize it is a young band, because of course it's about music. A young band goes on tour
Wow.
and they get a suspiciously cheap tour bus. And the reason they find out a little bit into the book, the reason it was so cheap is because it's haunted by an 80s rock band.
Oh, I'm reading that, man. That sounds like my kind of book, bro.
And so the book is written from the perspective of the lead singer.
Whoa.
And it's her memoir. And she is detailing, how the band came to be, how they, met these ghosts, what they did once they met the ghosts, and
Whoa.
just the chronicling the rise to fame for this small band. And it's looking at different relationships, because a lot of my interest in human nature is just in relationships, how we interact with each other. So it's person to person. It's her and her friend, her and her band, her
Wow.
and her and the ghosts, and then her with this one particular ghost who she might have a crush on.
Wow.
And how do you go about falling in love with a ghost?
That's
So
crazy. That's
it's
crazy, man. So
yeah.
so wow, I didn't realize that the title is actually a metaphor.
Hmm.
Ghostwriters, man. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that's super clever because when I first seen it, I thought it had something to do with ghostwriting songs and everything like that, but you just blew my mind. That's awesome. I'm a
And I wish I could lay claim to that, but yeah, I told you my mom was the big
yeah,
marketing person.
yeah.
That was her idea. She's
Wow.
like, "Oh, it's called Ghostwriters." Like she said as a joke. I was like, "Oh no, wait, I'm doing that now.
That's
I'm
that's a
stealing that immediately."
That's a dope name, and I'm such a like a supernatural
Mhm.
paranormal junkie, man. That I'm getting that, man. So make sure once we're done to send me all the links so I can plug them
Sure.
into the description. That way, people can get the book, can enjoy it. I know I'm gonna go get myself a copy, and I encourage everyone to do so. So this is before we go on to the like America's Next Top Hit Maker. I always, to me personally, I think this is what I think. My humble opinion is that writing a song, it's the toughest form of writing because when you're writing a book, you can kind of stretch it out and expand. And when you write a song, you kind of have to squeeze everything into like these 3 or 4 minutes. Do you would you agree with that? Or like how would you compare the two writing formats, a book and a song?
Yeah. So a book is like a marathon, and a song is like a sprint. So you for for a book, you have to make sure that you have enough ideas that
Hmm.
you can keep that thing, going
Hmm.
until you are done. You know, whereas the song is like, okay, I have to take everything I've ever thought of and put it in 3 minutes,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a guitar solo in there too, so two and a half, and it's very condensed. But at the same time, I almost struggle in the way of like I just wrote a song actually 2 days ago. I was very excited because I had had a bit of a writer's block, so I was like, "Oh, thank God," you know. But I had the idea where I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to write about X. Okay, I know I want to say this, this, and this. What else can I say about this? Like, I have to, there has to be a chorus here. So what's my thing with the chorus is always like, what's important enough to say about this topic that I want to say it multiple times within a short time span?"
Hmm.
So there's definitely the different levels of difficulty with it, and you do have space in a novel to be like, okay, we're going to take this chapter and we're going to go to Disney World, whereas the the song is very much like, if you don't finish this right now, it's going to go on way too long and no one's going to listen and it's going to be a thing. So there's definitely pros and cons, especially then when you have to take the song lyrics and you have to make sure, okay, is there a rhythm to this? Do they flow together nicely? Do they like they don't have to rhyme, but if you start rhyming, you better keep rhyming, or you better go back and undo that rhyme. And then now let's see if we can put it with a song. And now we have to write the music to go with the lyrics so that actually it's either way, it's a long process, pretty much.
Which one would you say you enjoy more? Like the process of writing a book, and specifically this book, or like let's say your debut album. Like which do which one do you enjoy more, or maybe you enjoy them both the same?
See, that's a really good question. It's kind of like this, I will say that probably on a day-to-day basis, I enjoy songwriting more than I enjoy prose writing, which is writing the novel.
Mhm.
So, but that's mainly because of sort of the instant gratification. It's
Yeah.
depending upon how long it takes to do song lyrics, which sometimes it's like trying to find that needle in the haystack and you're there for hours and hours, or sometimes it's like, okay, I just sneezed and the whole song came out. So there's sort of a quicker gratification that comes from writing song lyrics,
Mhm.
but I also feel like I get a more lasting gratification from the book. So like I'm still excited about this book. This book I graduated college August of last year. So I finished the book last summer, finished
Mhm.
completely writing, editing, everything. It was done. And
Wow.
then it took me about a year to get it published. Um, but I'm still like just as excited about the book as when I started writing it, with that initial idea in 2019. Whereas like, I'll write a song and I'll look at it, you know, 2 days later, I'm like, this wasn't as good as I thought it was initially. And now I'm not, now I'm kind of disillusioned with it. And now we're just gonna leave it in that notebook for a while, until it grows some fuzz on it and maybe we can take it in a different direction. But they're both very, very gratifying, just to keep using that word. They're very they're very gratifying in their own specific ways, and
Mhm.
I enjoy both, but probably on the day-to-day, just for that quicker hit of, dopamine,
Mhm.
the songwriting's probably a little
Mhm.
nice.
I got you. I'm super excited about this book now myself. And maybe it can turn into like this whole saga series, man. Maybe there will be other parts and everything like that. um so two things before we go on. I just, because you touched on a couple of things, I just wanted to add my 5 cents into it. First of all, the writer's block. To all you writers out there and creators out there, if you do hit a period where you feel like you're in a writer's block, enjoy that time, because artistically, don't be hard on yourself. Artistically, it usually means you're going through some sort of a metamorphosis, man. Like, and it's hard to go through it, but when you're on the other side of the lake, if you will, you will find that, well, now I'm rejuvenated, and now these new ideas are coming out. And the second thing I wanted to say is, because you mentioned like being your tough critic. What I've noticed in life is that every genius is their own toughest critic. So when the rest of the world is like, "You're awesome, you're amazing," the artist is always like, "Nah, I could do better." And don't be too hard on yourself in both cases. Now, um, uh, when I first got into the whole America's Next Top Hitmaker, and then when we were done with the contest, I thought to myself, because I have these podcasts, that we have to do a series, a Rolling Stone America's Next Top Hitmaker, a series. You are our first guest. We're gonna have artists that took part in the competition, and we're also going to have creators of the competition that will be on the podcast, so that's super exciting. um so take me back, like, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series on the Rolling Stone is because I think that us as artists, we have to be vocal about our experience as far as this competition. So How did you find out about the competition? How did you enter? And what did you feel when you initially got the message that you've been accepted?